So now I have some slides, and this is getting a little bit mathematical, but stick with me because I hope this makes sense, and feel free to put your questions in the chat as we talk about this. So first, we all kind of know what the eval chart is. We've seen these on chess.com. We've seen them on Lichess. So essentially, when the game starts, picture yourself playing the white pieces here. When the game starts, it's sort of like you just have a very slight advantage. But then, as you go, the eval changes, right? So it can keep increasing, drop a little, increase, drop, and so on. And eventually, you reach one of these three outcomes: win, draw, or loss. All right, so that's the eval chart. We all know how that works. And your goal is usually to get a win, or maybe sometimes to get a draw if your opponent's tough or it helps you in a tournament. Next, let's talk about what are imbalances. So there's 7 that I have listed here, but imbalances are kind of a fluid thing, right? We can define them with words, but a lot of it is just based on the position. So you may call an imbalance mobility, for example, and a mobility is not listed here, but it's a combination of some of these other factors. So we have superior minor pieces. This is a huge one. This is like a good knight against a bad bishop scenario. We have pawn structure. This is the one where I think most players want help with. They want to know, what is pawn structure? What are the different types of structures? What do the pawn structures mean in terms of creating plans? Then we have space, third, which is just like how much area of the board you control. So usually you want your pawns more advanced, and you'll control more space. We have material. This material is by far the most overrated imbalance. And there's a good reason for that. When we learn to play chess, almost everybody learns material first. And it makes sense. It's like a scoreboard. A pawn is worth 1, a minor piece is 3, a rook is 5, a queen is 9. Almost every chess player learns that when they start. But the thing with chess is every rule has exceptions. And as we improve as chess players, we need to constantly keep reforming our ideas about how chess works. And material is a big one. Players are so focused on material that as they improve, they have to later learn, like, okay, I can gambit a pawn, and it doesn't mean I'm losing the game, right? That's kind of step 1. And then step 2 might be, oh, I learned how to sacrifice exchanges, or I learned what the bishop pair is, or I learned how to grab a whole bunch of space, maybe at the cost of material. Like when the engine Alpha Zero came out, it had some incredible games, and it had some wins against Stockfish that were posted. Alpha Zero would sacrifice sometimes 2, 3, 4 points of material against Stockfish, which was at the time the strongest chess entity in the world, just for space. Like all it cared about is space, and it would also kind of try to control the opponent too. So space with locked up positions, and just long term it could crush Stockfish some games. So space is very important. Controlling key files and squares, a lead in development, and the initiative. And these 6 and 7 sort of go together. This is very important for us humans because humans make a lot of mistakes. So one of the best ways to win at chess is you want to give your opponent tough questions. So if you're ahead in development and you have the initiative, that means you're usually creating the threats, and your opponent has to react to you. And if you can create that situation where your moves are kind of low risk, you just keep attacking, creating little threats, making your opponent react, their position is higher risk because each of those moves, they could react incorrectly. Okay, so what I want to know from you guys, what do you think are the top 3 imbalances in your games? So list them in the chat. Top 3 imbalances. What are the most important ones in your games? And I'll try to think of mine as well. I think for me, material is up there, but it's probably number 2 or 3. I think for me, the superior minor pieces and the space are probably 1 and 2, with material 3. Okay, I see material, development, time on the clock. Okay, time on the clock is a really good one. I use time on the clock quite a bit as well. Material, pawn structure, control, no particular order. Material, space, pawn structure, space, development, initiative. A lot of material, a lot of space so far. Matt says 1, 3, and 7. Yep. Yeah, initiative is huge. I'm glad so many people are saying initiative, because initiative is hard to understand as a new player. But once you start to feel it in your games, like when you face people where you're like, man, I just can't get a breath in against them, can't ever just think in a calm position. Those are players that have the initiative all game against you, and they're making your life difficult. Space, material, initiative, material, space, pawn structure. Great question, Mitch. Lead in development, I think of as, do you have your pieces on good squares before your opponent? And initiative, I think of as, are you making your opponent react? Are you creating the threats? So you could have the initiative with just one developed piece. Like let's say you have your queen out there and you're just moving her all around, and your opponent has to react. You could have 4 pieces that are undeveloped and still have the initiative. Overwhelming calculations. Yep. Yeah, and I don't even have king safety in this list. So superior minor pieces could be sort of superior pieces in general. Like rooks are superior, queens. You could include kings, but king safety is a very big one as well. Dr. Roger is saying, would have been material, but now initiative. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is one that hopefully I can make clear what I'm trying to say. I've tried to explain this quite a bit. The result of the game is based on the eval. So if you go back to that eval chart, the eval goes up and down. As the eval approaches a win or a loss or a draw, it reaches kind of that steady state, and then the game, ends with that result. But during the game, the eval is sort of just an estimation of which side is better or worse. So if we look at this first little kind of box plot almost, this red line, think of the red line as the eval. So the game starts, say you have the white pieces. The game starts, the eval might be 0.2. So it's just barely above this white draw line. But then there's this complexity metric. And the longer this bar is, this blue bar, the longer that bar is, the more variation there is in a position. So think of a position that's very dry. Like let's just say it's king and pawn against king and pawn, and you know the pawns are on the same file and it's going to be a draw all day long. This red bar is going to be sitting on draw, and that blue bar is going to be very, very small, meaning there's very low chance of that eval changing. But if you have a very wild position, then the eval could change very easily and you have a wide range of outcomes. So think of the blue bar as like 80% of the time, the eval is going to fall in here. So if we think about it this way, kind of from a statistic point of view, the result of the game is the eval plus or minus the complexity. And the eval is going to be the sum of the imbalances that we talked about. So all of those imbalances create a numeric eval, but then the complexity is the odds of each side making a mistake. So sometimes the blue bar could actually be higher in your favor and lower in your opponent's favor if you have the initiative. If the position is more difficult for your opponent to play, if the odds of them making a mistake are greater than you making a mistake, the blue bar could be larger in your favor. So think about this scenario, the second bar. If you're in a very close to winning position, you want this blue bar to be small. When you're in a winning position, you want to convert it as smoothly as possible and don't give your opponent any chances. On the flip side, if you're in a much worse position, close to losing position, this third bar, the eval's right here, this red line, you want to create the largest amount of complexity possible, and especially in your favor. So sometimes you might even make moves that hurt the eval, and maybe you even know in your game, this move is going to hurt the Stockfish eval, but it's going to make things wild. It's going to change the imbalances. It's going to give me some new imbalances in my favor, and it will make the likelihood of my opponent making a mistake greater. That will give me chances to fight back in this game. Okay, so let me know in the chat. Is that clear? Does that kind of make sense? Because this feeds into how we're going to do our planning. Okay, PD is saying, I don't understand many times how much, oh yeah, how bad is eval? So 0.5, 0.6, etc. That's a great question. I like to take the Stockfish evals and cut them in half in terms of club level player games and even, 2200 level games. Usually the eval is way higher than what makes sense. So if you see an eval of +4, according to Stockfish, I would think of that as more like 2 pawns of material. And if it's +3, maybe a pawn and a half. So if you're down, let's say it's +2 eval, it's sort of like you're down a pawn. That's not the end of the world. But I think as your rating gets higher, that +1 matters more. And as the time control gets slower, that +1 matters more. And the reason for that is, as your rating gets higher and as the time control gets longer, odds of mistakes go down. And that means that that eval is more likely the scenario. There's less variation. So faster time controls and lower ratings, the eval matters a little bit less, right? You might need a +2 instead of a +1 to have the same likelihood of winning. Okay, people are saying makes sense. Tukey couldn't have explained it better. I love that, Ethan. Yeah, simplify when ahead, throw sand in their face when behind. Exactly right. Yeah, Dr. Roger, that's exactly right. So he has lost 2 games with slow time controls, high evals because of complexity. One of the best examples of that, I've played Andrew Tang in a couple of games, and I had 2 games where I had really strong positions against him. This was back when he was an IM. In both times, he made the position wildly complicated and just blew me off the board. And it almost seemed effortless. So that's what you want to try to emulate in your games. When you're in worst position, make it complicated. All right. So now let's jump into the first game of the lesson. So I have a few games prepared for you guys. This first one, we have Botvinnik playing the white pieces, and we have Boleslavsky playing the black pieces. This is from the USSR Championship in 1941. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some example positions, and we're going to talk about how do we evaluate the position in terms of imbalances, and then we're going to talk about plans and what moves that we would play. So everyone take a look at this first position. We're playing the white side. We're Botvinnik here. And our opponent just plays queen to c6. So what I want you guys to do in the chat, put what you think the eval is numerically, and then put what you think favors us and what favors the opponent. So however you want to type it in the chat, numeric eval, imbalances that favor us and imbalances that favor black. And then we'll talk through them. And don't worry about right answers, wrong answers. Really, when it comes to guessing an eval, there's a lot of variation. Like you can't get it exact. And when it comes to imbalances, it's not always white and black. So Presta J is saying we got the rooks connected. That's right. Chess coach, how do you make a position complicated? Usually what you want to do is look for threats to create so that your opponent has to think about how do I defend everything. Create threats. Okay, we got 2 rooks on the open file. That's right, PD Rath. What else here? And type the eval too. What do you think the eval is in this position? Because that matters. I just realized I'm showing the eval bar. Dennis said 1.0. I'm taking your eval bar away, guys. 0.5 eval, 3.4, +1, +1. Wow, a lot of +1s. I have the eval bar showing from a different recording. +2, good rooks. Better pawn structure and initiative. .5, rooks on the open file. Yeah, so I think you guys are right about the rooks. The eval is 1.1. Now let's think about what is Black's best plan. Black has the IQP as well. That's right. Okay, so I'll put the strengths in green. So we got the 2 rooks, the weaknesses in red. Potential weakness here. These rooks are not well placed. What do we think the best plan is for Black? There is a threat on this pawn on A4. Let's think about the best plan for Black. Put the knight on E4, ruin all of White's plans. Attack the queen. Oh, attack on the queen side. Complicate the queen side. A4 pawn. Open file. Open file is the correct answer. So the best plan for Black is to actually put this rook back on D8 and then move the rook over to E8 and try to contest for the open file. That's the best plan for Black. All right, so now to think about our own plan, we know that Black has this threat on A4. We know that they're about to contest the file, and there's not a lot going on. Our only advantage here seems to be the rooks and maybe the weak pawns for Black. So what we want to do is look for new imbalances that can favor us. We know it's going to take Black a couple moves to get the rooks traded off. There's a very nice plan here, and Botvinnik doesn't play the strongest move, but he plays the right idea. What should our plan be here to create a new imbalance in our favor? And this is one where if you haven't seen this idea before, it's extremely difficult. But once you see it, you're going to start using it in your own games. And this is one of the cool things about studying positional ideas like this. It just helps build this database of ideas in your mind, and then you can start using them in your games. Pinned pawn to the queen. Okay, so maybe give me a move here for White and what the idea is. So put your top move for White. Tell me what the idea is. Knight e5, force the trade of knights. Knight f4, trade knights. Queen d1. Rook to d8, or rook to e8. I'll give you a hint. It involves the knights. Queen e2. Let's make this knight on g6 a bad piece. That's a bigger hint. How do we make the knight on g6 a bad piece? G3, G3. Okay, we have a couple Botvinniks in the chat. G3, G3, G3. G3 is what Botvinnik played. There is a stronger move though. You could play queen to f2 here. And the thing with queen to f2 is she also guards the h4 square. So this idea of h4, h5, that's the main plan. And queen to f2 is just kind of stockfish saying, yes, you guys played this game in the 1940s, 1941. There's a stronger way to do it. And I'll show you what could happen, but let's go to g3 first. So g3 played in the game, rook to d6. Now Botvinnik plays h4, and h5 is coming. And if you look at this knight, it can't go here, 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 or here. So the only square it has currently is h8. So f6 was played. And now Botvinnik plays queen f5. And after queen to c8, he trades queens and then plays h5, forcing this knight back. And the crazy thing with this position, the eval is +3. Botvinnik is already +3 here with equal material. Why is that? Every single piece for white is better than the counterparts. The rooks control the only open file on the board. White has the initiative. This rook is going to come to the 7th rank, probably over to the b file, and the two weakest pawns on the board are both blacks. These pawns can't be defended by any other pawns, and they're fairly easy to attack. So we'll just go a couple moves forward and see what happens. Rook e7, knight to f4, putting some pressure here. g4. And what I love about this game is Botvinnik is completely fine with trades as long as he has enough imbalances to play for the win. Take, take. And now finally, a big mistake by black, pawn to g5. Here Botvinnik takes, which is a mistake. But if he plays the move knight to g2, this is a +3.5 advantage now. And look at black's position. Everything is tied down. This knight is ready to come into e3, maybe come to f5. The rook is dominating the opposing rook. And a move like rook to e6 doesn't help because rook b7. And this rook can't come to the second because this pawn drops. And the white king is about ready to control all of the entry points. Yeah, en passant should be forced, right? Okay, so now let's go back and look at the stronger version of this. Queen to f2, even stronger. Now, let's say queen takes a4, because I think that's what a lot of us wonder. Why can't black just grab a pawn? I think in a game, this looks like black just won a free pawn. But now h4. And the best move for black here is actually h5. h5 just looks logical. But now there's pawn to g4. And the same idea is threatened. G takes h. So if black takes, now h5, knight retreats, and now queen to h2. And the beauty of this position is the queen on a4 is stuck out here. So this is why queen f2 was an improvement, because the queen is getting more active in the attack with this line. Now h6 is a threat with the queen behind it, and white has rooks ready to come to the g file. And look at black's pieces. Queen can't come back because of the fork. So let's say the rook comes over, trying to bring the queen back. Now knight f4. Queen can come to g2, double attacking this. Black defends. Queen takes g4. h6. Now black is up 2 pawns. But black is in huge trouble, threatening checkmate. Can move the queen away. Queen c6. Knight takes d5 coming next. And look at how every black piece is paralyzed. We have a +5 advantage for white. So this is just an incredible game by Botvinnik, showing how, starting from this position, he was able to create this new imbalance, the bad knight. And that just sidelined black from doing any of his plans, right? The main plan was to try to equalize. He said, nope, let's make a new imbalance. We're going to make it about the knight's superior minor piece. And that was able to convert the win. All right, let's go to game number 2. In this game, we have with the white pieces, Mikhail Botvinnik. So here we reach an opening position, and black plays knight to c5. So even though this is a middle game course, I think this is sort of like the very start of the middle game. Each side has done their standard plans, or their kind of memorized moves, I guess, in the opening. Here, what I want you guys to do is tell me the eval and tell me what the imbalances are. So put that in the chat. What's the eval and what are the imbalances? Yeah, Dr. Roger, it's hard to figure out when you can sacrifice pawns like that. But with practice, you'll start to get a good feel for it. And I think this is a big benefit of playing a lot of blitz and rapid chess online. You can experiment, see what the engine thinks. So, when I play blitz, I play very aggressively. And I play a lot more solid with classical chess. But that blitz aggression helps me build an intuition on how to find those tactical sharp moves and how to balance material versus other dynamics. Because after every single blitz game, I go back into analysis mode and I look at the mistakes and I look at the stockfish ideas and I try to learn something from every single game. But then you can start to build that understanding of how do I balance material with the other imbalances. Okay, I got a 0.6 for white, PD. What about imbalances? More space, +1 for white. You guys still see the eval bar? Maybe I had it too small. Okay, let me know if you see the eval bar or not. Tiny sliver? I think it's gone now. Okay, that's better. 0.4, space advantage. Black has key control. It's gone now. So material's equal. There's a good knight for black on c5. Yep, slight space advantage for white. That's right. And here's what we should note. V pawn formation. We talk about this a ton in the Sicilian course that just came out because we have a lot of these V pawn formations for black in the Sicilian course. This is where we start to look into pawn structure. What are the plans with the pawns usually when you have a V pawn formation? You guys know about this? So when you have sort of a base and then the pawns V out from there, what's typically your plan with the pawns? Yeah, PD Wrath, you're on the right path. Reg Dog, that's exactly right. We want to play pawn to b4 and pawn to f4. So when you have that V formation, right, press a J. You attack in the direction of the pawns, and the V formation gives you the direction of kingside and queenside. So the best move for white here is either b4 or f4. So f4 was played by Botvinnik. The eval is 0.7. c6 was played by black. And the idea is to play b5. Black wants to fight back against this pawn advantage, the space advantage that white has. Now, move h3 is played. h3 is actually a really good move. The idea here is it prevents knight to g4, which can sometimes cause some tactical issues. Knight to e6 played by black. And now, this is a key move. So without necessarily telling me what the imbalances are, give me your top move in the chat. What move would you play here as white? And there's one move that stands out. It's about 4/10 of a pawn better than the second best move. Okay, f takes e5. 1 vote. e4. I'm thinking that means d4. 2 votes for f5. f5, f5, king h2, f5, f5, a4, f5, f takes e. Okay, so I'm going to go on my little pawn tension tangent here that I always talk about, so I'm sure if you've heard it, you're probably like, okay, Matt, that's enough. These two pawns attack each other. This pawn does not want to take us because we take back. This pawn has the option of pushing or taking. So the pawn tension favors white. Usually you don't want to relieve the tension unless you can increase your advantage or there's some sort of new imbalance that you're playing for. So in this case, white should keep that pawn on f4 until there's a really good reason to do something with it. So you always want to be careful when you push or take if the imbalance favors you. In this case, f5 is a very strong move. So a lot of Botvinniks in the chat again. That's exactly right. f5, great move. This increase in space, in addition to opening the dark square bishop, gives white a 0.9 advantage. And now white's starting to build the initiative. Knight to d4. And now look at this pawn chain building by white. d3, e4, f5, g4 can be played. And if you look at the kings, even though these pawns for white are on the normal fianchetto squares, f2, g3, h2, the white king is safe. So the white king is just as safe as the black king right now because no black pieces can really get at the king. But what we're trying to do is create a new imbalance advantage. So we're going to use the space advantage and we're going to use the mobility advantage with our pieces, and we're going to decrease the king safety for black. Knight e8 played, bishop e3, a6, queen d2. So Botvinnik connects the rooks. Pawn to b5, bishop to g5, provoking bishop f6. And bishop f6 is the top move here, because otherwise, if the black queen moves away, this pawn might land on f6, and then black is in really rough shape. So bishop f6 played, and Botvinnik trades bishops. Just like last game, he has an advantage, and he's making trades. So it's similar to when you have a material advantage, how a lot of trades can help simplify the win. If you have an imbalance advantage, and you can create trades that either keep your imbalance advantages or increase your imbalance advantages, those trades will help you. So what he's doing here is he wants to weaken the black king. He just removed the g7 bishop that defended these dark squares. So even though his bishop did attack those same dark squares, it's a net positive for white because now the king's safety gets worse for black. That king is more vulnerable to attack. So now knight takes d4. He trades another set of pieces, and this is also the strongest move. He's making the whole position about the weak king. And he's going to shift. He has the space. He has the mobility. He's going to shift his pieces over to the king's side where he already has the king safety advantage. Knight to e2. Targets this pawn. Black defends it with queen b6. And now he plays c takes b. Same idea. This is a small mistake, but Botvinnik is playing very principled chess here. He trades these pawns because now he doesn't have to worry about b taking c, ruining his pawn chain, maybe weakening this pawn. So at this point, white has a 4.6 eval. Huge eval advantage, and we're equal material. That's why these games are incredible, because I'm trying to show you guys games where the material doesn't matter as much as all these other imbalances. And the imbalances are, in my opinion, the root of chess planning. All chess planning should stem from what are the imbalances in the position. So what is the best move for white here? Put your moves in the chat. One move really stands out with the 4.6 eval. Most other moves are around +3 or less. So there are multiple good moves, but one stands out. Queen h6, queen h6, queen h6, queen h6. Wow, you guys are good. That is correct. Queen to h6. Excellent move. Bishop d7, and now pawn to g5. And you just start crashing through. Knight h5, and then Michael's move comes into play here, knight f4. So Botvinnik is trying to trade the knights off. And knight g7 played. Botvinnik plays f6, and this is a forced checkmate in 8 moves, and his opponent resigned. And here's why. Knight e8, only move. There's a really crazy tactic here. Okay, I'm going to ask you guys again. See if you can find the one move that gets you mate in 8. The next best move is a +8. Only one move here is a forced checkmate. Let's see who can get it first. One move is forced checkmate. Knight h5. Rook f3. Knight h5. Knight g6. No one's gotten it yet. h4. No. Come on, guys. 8 moves. You can calculate 8 moves. Probably a queen sack? No. Presta J only calculates 7 moves, so I give him a pass. We have the answer. Shiksha says knight to d5. Brilliant move. It's similar to knight h5. We want to move the knight, but this comes with the threat of knight e7 and the queen, but the whole point is rook f4 and the rook swings over. So let's say c takes d, rook f4, forced mate in 6. All black can do are just sacrifice some pieces. Like rook takes a2, for example, just trying to slow white down as much as possible. But it's a forced checkmate. Down the file. Nothing black can do here. Mate. Okay, so David is saying Botvinnik ruined his castle position by moving the pawns. I learned not to ruin my castle position. Isn't that an imbalance? Great question, David. So, in this position, moving the pawns, even though it opens up the king, look at how many white pieces are around the king. And then look at black's position. I'm going to flip it even. How does black attack the king? So this is kind of another thing where I actually learned this in a Chessable course. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was like the positional chess course, the new one that they had just come out. And what was talked about there is top level players just in the past couple decades have realized that king safety is not only about the pawns in front of your king, but it's the mobility of pieces near your king. So if you have a lot of pieces near your king, but your pawns are extended, those pieces actually provide you king safety. So white's doing pretty well here because there's so many white pieces that can help defend the king, and there's really only the one black knight that's about to cause any problems. So that's a great question. But when you think about king safety, that's kind of the next level. Like as a new player, we're taught not to move pawns in front of our king, but sometimes it's okay. And this is one of those cases. Yeah, and the center is also blocked. That's right. Okay, so 2 excellent games from Botvinnik. We're now going to game number 3. And we have Botvinnik with the white pieces. All right. And if you guys are looking for a player to study their games, Botvinnik is an excellent choice. Like just go through Botvinnik games. And the beauty of his games is these games tend to be played in the 1930s and 1940s. His opponents aren't silicone trained monsters like the current top GMs, right? His opponents are making mistakes. He's playing with nice chess principles that we can pick up on in our own games. And that makes these games perfect games to study from. So in this game, we are on move 19. Botvinnik just played e4. The opponent plays e5. So we'll put in the chat. Put in the chat, what is the eval here? And what are the imbalances? So what imbalances favor us and which imbalances favor black? Okay, I'm going to look up the Chessable course name. It's also a book. Middlegame plans of Queen's Gambit. Okay, yeah, a Botvinnik course would be amazing. Okay, the book is called Techniques of Positional Play. It's by New in Chess. Really good book. All right, so we got white bishop on the open diagonal. Yes. Nice bishop. +1 for white. Control of the D file. Open file control. 2 rooks on the open file. Black hasn't developed the bishop. Great shame. Agree with Atticus J. The +1. +8. Or 0.8, excuse me. Piece activity. Open files diagonal. +2 for white. Okay, you guys are on the right track. It's a +1.6. We got the rooks. Much better. Control the open file. The potential weak pawn on a4. I think we got to say that favors black. There's one other point to mention here, and this is about the minor pieces and their mobility. So we did have mentioned that that bishop was bad, but also let's look at this knight. So before we saw the knight on g6 being kicked, this knight is also potentially bad if it gets kicked. Because what's happening here is the black pieces are fighting for control through the d7 square. So there's 3 minor pieces that all want to utilize d7 potentially. Like let's say black wants to later move the king, play f5. That knight probably wants to go to d7. If this knight is kicked, it wants d7. If this bishop wants to develop safely, it might want to go to d7 and then c6. So there's this interesting dynamic where a lot of pieces want to use d7. So now put your top move in the chat. Botvinnik played the 3rd best move here. There's 2 other good moves. So let's just see what you guys think. If you can name one of the top 3 moves, it's a very impressive job because all of them push the initiative. And these are the types of moves that you want to start playing in your games if you aren't already. You want to find these moves as often as possible. Yeah, I see pawn to a5, rook to d6, h3, rook d8, h3. Rook d8. No Botvinniks are left in the chat. Rook d8, knight d5, knight h4. Rook b8. Oh, rook b1 and b4. Okay, one person mentioned the 2nd best move. Atticus J mentioned rook to d6. That's 2nd best. No one has mentioned the top move yet, and no one has mentioned the Botvinnik move. So if you've already said an answer, put a new answer in. Let's see if we can get the top move and the Botvinnik move. Rook d6 is 2nd best. And we'll look at all 3. Not bishop f7. Not knight d4. This is hard. Okay, Botvinnik plays a queen move, and the top move is a rook move. There's some hints. The top move is a rook move. Botvinnik played a queen move. It's too bad this class isn't in person. We could have like Skittles or something for a prize. Each time you get it right, you get a Skittle or a treat of your choice. Rook c1 is close, Atticus J. Yeah, Presta J's got it. Rook c2. Rook c2 is the top move. No one said the Botvinnik move yet. Just one skill, Ragdog. We can't have you get too much sugar, especially if you're getting all of them right. So the difference is rook c2 is defended by the queen. All right, so first let's look at rook d6. Rook d6 has the threat of rook takes f6. This is an imbalance that I'm currently working on. It's taken me forever to value the exchange sacrifice. I've had it so ingrained in my head, 5 points versus 3 points, that I miss exchange sacrifices and I undervalue exchange sacrifices constantly in my games. And in my last OTB game, I got to sacrifice the exchange in the endgame. And it was one of the top Stockfish moves. And I was really happy about that because I finally realized how to look for an exchange sack in a game. I just don't do it very often. Let's see how this works. Rook e8, rook takes f6, pawn takes back, and now a5, kicking the knight. And if queen takes a5 is played, this just drew the queen away from the defense of the king side. So this would be a +3 material advantage for black, but Stockfish is saying +5 for white with knight h4. So this king's safety is ruined for black. And look at these black pieces all on the queen side. They're not doing a lot. White has 3 attackers currently. The bishop on the diagonal, the knight over here, and the queen. After queen c5 trying to come back to defend, we have queen h5 attacking this, queen f8, rook d3. Now we have 4 attackers. And how many defenders? Probably 1. Bishop e6 trying to trade off an attacker. Now we can go knight f5. And after bishop takes f5, queen takes f5, the black pieces are paralyzed. This knight has no squares. It can only go to c8. This rook is coming over very quickly. The queen's taking f6. If this knight moves, our knight's jumping to d5. +5.5. Yes, savage attack. Good lord, that's exactly right. This game is over, and it all started with rook to d6, threatening rook takes f6. Okay, now let's look at the strongest move just briefly. This is a Stockfish move, rook c2, but the threat is huge. This knight is going to move, attacking the queen with the rook, and the rook is defended. So this one's not as positionally beautiful as rook to d6 or the Botvinnik move, but that is the Stockfish move, and it is really strong. Okay, now going back to the Botvinnik move. One more time, guys. Oh wait, we did get the Botvinnik move. Chess coach. Queen e3, so I won't quiz you again. Queen e3 is the Botvinnik move. It's offering trade of queens and giving us doubled isolated pawns. This looks really ugly, but what just happened is we traded off the most active black piece, and now we made the game all about the open file. So Botvinnik is doing that thing again. He's saying, okay, I'm going to trade off pieces that don't involve my imbalance advantages so that the imbalance advantages come more to life. So there's a bigger highlight on this open file now with the queens off the board. Bishop to g4. And now here, I think you guys will get this one. What is the best move for white? What's the best move for white here? Keep working on the imbalances. A5, rook f1. Best move for white. B3. Oh, Dr. Rogers going back to game 1 example. Knight e5, exchange sack. A5, H3, knight F5, H3. The top move is a 1.1 eval. Second best is 0.3. This is a tough position, but a few of you got it. The answer is pawn to A5. So Atticus J, Danny, Shiksha, all got the answer. It's pawn to A5. And this knight doesn't have a great square. And this goes back to the pieces fighting over D7. If the knight goes here, pawn to H3 is a really strong move. And in the game, knight to C8 was played. So I think black was thinking in the game, I will reroute this knight. Maybe bring it out this way. Rook C1 played. After bishop takes, G takes, the knight starts to reroute. Botvinnik just plays for these open files. And at this point, after knight to D5, knight to C6 played, this is a mistake. So what do we play here? How do we increase our advantage here? Hey, Justin, welcome. National Master Justin Storn in the chat. So Justin, we're looking at a Botvinnik game, talking about imbalances and middle game planning. Michael, it just came down to the timing. So playing A5 first forced that knight to a bad square, whereas H3, I think black would take on F3 and then have one free move before we got to play A5. Yeah, Atticus J is correct. And Rook is correct. Knight takes F6 check. Chess coach got it. David got it. So what we're doing here is we want to infiltrate on the 7th rank. We would love to get a rook down here. So the top move, knight takes F6, is +3. The next best move is a 1.6. So we take, G takes, rook D7, hitting this pawn, hitting this pawn. And this one's a double attack, right? So we're already tying down the rook and king to this pawn. Now black needs to defend this pawn. So look at how all these pieces are tied down to defense. Black is attacking this one pawn, but Botvinnik says you can have A5. Look at this move he plays. King F2. He doesn't care about the pawn because the activity is more important. After knight takes A5, a pretty good move here, second best, is rook G1 check. And then you could win this pawn. But look at what Botvinnik plays. Rook C to C7. He doubles on the 7th rank. And after rook to C8, now he takes F7. And he's got the bishop lined up behind the rook, creating a discovered check. Rook takes C7 played. Rook takes C7 check. King to H8. And now bishop to D5. This is a really important point, guys. Look at how this bishop controls the knight. This bishop covers both of these diagonals, and the knight wants to go to one of these 4 squares. The bishop is dominating the knight. This is where the saying knights on the rim are dim kind of comes from, right? The knight only has 4 potential squares from the rim of the board, from the edge, whereas in the center, the knight can have up to 8 squares. That bishop not only controls all the squares in the knight, but it also controls squares in the other direction. So right now there are white pawns down here, but the bishop controls the knight and it's also watching the other side of the board. Not only that, this bishop is controlling access for the black rook trying to get in through the D file. So the knight is stuck on the edge of the board. The rook doesn't have access to any files. The bishop guards this square, rook guards this square. Black is paralyzed again. The knight is in jail. That's right. After B5, B3. So black was thinking, maybe I'll get the knight to c4. Botvinnik says, nope, pawn to b3. Full control of the board. If you can get chess games where you have full control of the board, to me, that's the most beautiful way to play chess. And when your opponent is just sitting there squirming and they can't figure out how to get any piece active, they're going to make big blunders. They can't just sit and wait for you to checkmate them. They're going to make even larger blunders, and games like this will go downhill very quickly for your opponent. Yeah, look at Justin's recommendation, guys. Rook d8, king g3, f5, king h4. It's exactly what Justin's saying. He's walking the king up the board. If he gets the king here, rook h7 is mate. F takes E played. And there is a little bit of shuffling here. So black is putting up some defense, not allowing the king in. There's a little bit of shuffling by Botvinnik trying to figure out how to make progress. But he also doesn't need to rush this, right? He can kind of sit and try a few different things, see what happens. Fast forwarding a few moves. Now finally he starts making progress with bishop f7, and he's putting the bishop on g6. Now the pawn hangs. And even though there's connected passers over here, Botvinnik is now threatening a mate. Then he checks, plays bishop f7. This is a mate in 18 moves. Presta J already has it calculated, I think, in the chat. But rook has to take. This is the only move, otherwise rook h7 is mate. Take, king g8, king g6. Doesn't matter what black does. Mate is threatened. Pawn is running. These pawns are too slow. Another just beautiful game by Botvinnik. Okay, so now, game number 4. Botvinnik with the white pieces. We have this position. Bishop f6 played. So I want you guys to evaluate this and mention the imbalances in the chat again. Eval and imbalances. Rook and PD are asking about rook to g2 check. I'll have to look at that later. I'll have to go back to that later. I think that one, it was just Botvinnik had such an advantage on the 7th rank. And the rook to g1 check was the second best move at the time. And they were pretty close. So it's probably just as winning as Botvinnik's plan. Okay, slightly more active for white. More activity. Bad bishop for black, wants to exchange. Open file for white, C file. Justin saying +2, space and piece play. Space for white, 0.7. Space for white. Yeah, you guys are on the right track. Black is very cramped, white has space. +2 is the eval. Justin's exactly right. Knights have almost no squares for black. Yes. So, the move that Botvinnik plays here is really cool. He goes rook to a2. And you might be wondering, why rook to a2? It doesn't really seem to do anything. Rook to a2 is setting up this plan of either doubling the rooks on the a file or doubling rooks on the c file. So picture this rook coming to either c1 or a1 with this rook on c2 or a2. This is a waiting move, but a useful one. Now the engine does say a takes b is a little bit stronger, but I like this move a lot. And here, black plays pawn to b5. So the idea with b5, look at these pawn chains. Black's pawn chain points over here to the king side. Black wants to attack king side. White's pawn chain points queen side, so white wants to play on the queen side. So what black is doing is they're shutting down the queenside play. That's the plan. Let's remove this pawn tension, and let's make the game about the kingside. So I want to know, what do you guys think of this move? b5. Good or bad? Do you like this move? David's saying good. Frustrating for us. Don't see how it helps black. Good. Justin's saying bad. Knights are still trapped. Justin, why is this move bad? Could weaken the dark squares. Depends if bishop takes b5 works. Doesn't fix black's problems. Bad for black. Restricts black's pieces. Yeah, you guys are on the right track. So it's a little bit of a trick question because it's a bad move, but it only lost maybe half a point of eval. But it is a bad move. It's a small mistake. Now, there's a crazy plan for white here that Botvinnik plays. Can you tell me in the chat what the plan is for white? It doesn't have to be moves, just in general. What is white going to do? Like, say, in the next 10 moves, just what's the overarching plan for white? And he's using his space and the fact that the pawns are locked up to execute this plan. Think like Botvinnik, guys. I mean, usually when there's a what move did Botvinnik play question, we have a lot of Botvinniks in the chat. Yeah, I don't see any answers. Everyone's thinking. Think outside the box a little bit. This is not easy. You need to be creative. Okay, no one has anything yet? 45 viewers, no one has the plan? What do you guys think? Yeah, Rig Dog chat frozen. I thought the stream went down for a second. Sack on b5. Castle. Use it as a hook to rip open the queen side. h4, h5. King walk to b3. Alekine's gun on the c file. Take away the queen side pawns. Chat was froze. Oh, the chat was actually froze? That's crazy. I was wondering. I was like, what? Where is everybody? Sacrifice the knight. Sack the knight. Two passers queen side. Okay, okay, I'm glad the chat wasn't working. I'm glad it's back though. Only one person I think has mentioned the plan. And that's the national master in the chat. Oh yeah, it's YouTube AI chat. So if you type the wrong answer, it'll just block you. It's new, experimental. Just on the ChessGoals channel. Mark, that's right. So it's a king walk over to the queen side. So the pawns are locked up on the queen side. The pawns are locked up in the center. The only pawns that aren't locked up are king side. Botvinnik says, I have more space, so I can more easily move pieces left and right horizontally. I'm going to shift the attack king side. And he plays king d1. Rook f7, king c1, queen c7, king b1, queen b7, rook c1, bishop c2, bishop to b3. And essentially what Botvinnik is doing is he's putting all of his pieces on the best squares possible. And black is trying to do the same thing, right? So they're both maneuvering. But the problem here for black is he's trying to put all of his forces kind of guarding the entry points on the c file, seeing that Botvinnik just put his rooks over there. But this cuts off some pieces from the king side. So now we reach this position. Both sides have kind of tried to improve their pieces as much as possible. And I think now you guys probably know the idea, but what's the best move here? What did Botvinnik play in this position? We need to weaken the black king. Rook to g1, that's a good move. What did white play here? g4, h4, queen c3, triple stack. Okay, I worked at Wendy's for one summer, and I had a manager that would make a hamburger called the triple stack, because we only had a double stack on the menu, but he would put 3 patties together. There's a lot of grease. I don't know if he's still alive, actually, with all that grease. But nice guy. So h4 is the answer. You guys are right. If you said h4, g3, g4, those are on the right path. h4, you try to open up the black king. Even though it doesn't look like right now that white has enough forces over there, this is the best solution. Open up the black king. Reg Dog, I wonder where that story is going. h6, queen d1, queen g1. So he shifts his queen over. And look at this again. You see how Botvinnik's opponent is thinking, let's trade rooks, right? Rook c8, rook takes c2. I love how Botvinnik is fine with trades if they don't hurt his imbalance advantages. He doesn't care about that one set of rooks trading off. Bishop c8, g3. So he's trying to chip away at these pawns. G takes f is a threat, so black has to take. So now, new imbalance. So imbalances aren't this static thing. Imbalances are constantly changing. And I think this is what makes chess so beautiful. Like, we can learn certain rules and, you know, try to follow like general principles, but really in chess, it's constantly evolving the imbalances throughout the game. That's what makes chess so beautiful. So now we have this half-open file. This is brand new imbalance that was just created by Botvinnik. And it's creating a weaker king position for black. So king safety and the half-open file. Knight f6, queen g2. Knight comes out here, and knight g3. What just happened? Botvinnik offers a trade. He's saying, okay, you have this good knight on h5. My knight on e2 wasn't doing much. I'm fine with that trade. We're still focused on this. We're focused on this. And your pieces are a little bit more passive. Rook c7 offers a trade. What does Botvinnik do? Take the rook. That's fine. Goes f4. Take, take. He takes. And now this move was essentially forced because we were going to take here. 3 attackers on it. Now, after e takes f, we can start to see the black king becoming more and more in trouble. Look at this diagonal towards the king. King moves, queen takes f4. All 4 of Botvinnik's pieces are ready to launch into the attack. So essentially, Botvinnik somehow traded off all the pieces that didn't matter, was left with 4 pieces ready to attack, and look at black's remaining pieces. Yeah, the knight's kind of helping and the queen can get over. The bishops aren't really helping in the defense. This king is much weaker than white's. And this goes back to that question we had earlier. How is the white king safe when these pawns are advanced? Well, there's no way for black to easily attack it, and there's also pieces nearby that can help defend. Queen e7, pawn to e5. This opens up the light bishop, which has been waiting to get into the game. Pawn takes, bishop takes. Now the king is very weak for black. Knight d7 played, which is a mistake. Bishop just drops back. And look at these guys. These bishops are monsters, pointing at the king. And look at the counterparts. Look at the bishops on the 8th rank. We had a question about bishop to f6. In this position, bishop f6 is a decent move. After take, queen takes f4, we're still looking at a +4 advantage for white. Okay, let's jump back to that game position. Queen to f8 played, offering a queen trade. What does Botvinnik do? You would think keep the queens on, we're attacking. He goes h5. He appreciates that this queen trade is actually okay, because the attack is still strong enough to convert the win. So if we go back to like thinking about the stuff we talked about in the very beginning, the eval and the complexity, and you want to make it more simple when you're ahead and complex when you're behind, Botvinnik is way ahead, and he's just simplifying as long as he knows he's still winning. Queens come off, king moves, h takes g, black resigns here. So it's +1 material, but look at this knight. The knight has no forward progress. Every square is covered. Knight f6 is the only move available, but pawn to d6 can be played. Bishop to b3 check is coming, which puts the king potentially on this diagonal. This is one where you can try different moves for black, but every move Stockfish is crushing as white, and it's a +6 advantage. So pawn d6, black resigned. So that was game number 4 from Botvinnik. So we could now either go into, we could talk about the course promotion. We could look at one more Botvinnik game, or I have one of my games prepared with a similar idea. What do you guys want to do? Put a 1 in the chat for course promotion, 2 for Botvinnik, 3 for my game. Course promotion. Well, there were a couple course promotions, but now everyone's saying 3. Mat game. Wait, was 3 the mat game? I already forgot. Botvinnik was 2 and 3 was mat, is that right? Okay, thanks, Justin. Mat game? Okay. All right. So this was my game. Played just a couple weeks ago against a player from our chess club, Soren. I'm playing the white pieces. And we get to this position. So it came out of this is called a 2 knights tango when black puts both these knights out. And I grabbed this space right off the bat. And in this position, I knew this was good. I knew this was good for white. But I also kind of see the plans for black. He wants bishop c5, pointing at f2. He's got both knights on the king side, and if my king ends up on g1, he might have a pretty good attack going. Maybe he can get the f-pawn up the board after he gets castled, right? I see this potential attack for black, but I know it should be better for white. And the eval is 0.8. So what I want you guys to do now is tell me what's the best move for white. Put the best move for white in the chat. If you want to go deeper, you can tell me what the plan is too. Because there's one move for white that I played and I thought looked really strong, but there's a tactic involved that you have to see. G3 or H4, Justin. That's going back to like game number 1, Botvinnik. So Justin's a master, and he wasn't here at the start of the stream, but he knows this idea. When you see a knight on G6, you try to control its squares. H3, knight H3, bishop G5, G4. A lot of good ideas. No one said the move I played in the game, which is probably good. The best plan, I think, is pawn to H4. The threat is simple. Pawn to H5. And black is not ready for this. So the best move for black is H5. Now knight E2. And the idea with knight E2 is if this bishop ever tries to come to G4, we're going to play F3. So we're playing to control the black pieces. After bishop C5, we can pin this knight. D6, knight G3. Well, this is the other idea of knight E2. The knight coming to E2 and then to G3 creates a double attack on this H-pawn. So now black cannot castle. Black cannot move this knight. Black cannot easily move this knight. There's only one active piece for black, this bishop. Bishop G4. Oh yeah, so you could go F3 here. This was the move that I had analyzed as the Botvinnik style move. Let's go bishop E2. This is our bad bishop. We don't really care about this trade. We're trying to control the rest of black's plans. And now we can go A3. And if queenside castle, we go B4. And if black doesn't queenside castle, they have to leave the king in the center. So this is kind of a Botvinnik-esque full control of the position, and it came out of the passive opening by black. You create space in this situation where black can't move their king either direction, and we have a simple plan of expanding queenside. So now let's see what happened in the game. I played A3, bishop C5. I chickened out here. Pawn to B4 is the best move. And after this, knight to E2. Knight takes E4, and you sack the exchange. This is what we talked about earlier. Exchange sacks, for me, are a takeaway that I need to improve on. But after bishop takes H4, this is actually quite a bit better for white. Black is +3 on material, but it's better for white. This is amazing. If D6, you go H5. And if this knight moves back, you go H6. This is +3. If G6 is played, knight F6. This is really bad for black. These are the positions that you have to really just play around with the engine to appreciate. Because I'm still looking at it thinking, yeah, I see that white has a ton of play, and I see black is up +3 in material, but how exactly does white convert? The problem is the knight coming to F6, it looks like. Like I'm kind of wondering, can black castle even? Oh, now this comes and the H-pawn drops. Wow. And after G6, it was this. Bishop G5 hitting the bishop. And if it tries to move, Queen B3. Queen B2. Wow. So I'm just making moves for black and seeing what the engine says for white. I'm trying to find my best plan as black. Black is just completely paralyzed again. This is +7 at this point. If A5, knight H5, threatening this. If the rook moves, okay, this is beautiful. Question for the chat. What do we play here? This is a checkmate in 5 moves. Chess Simple, I think this doesn't go with the complexity idea completely because In my mind, the position is a little more complex for white as well. But I think that was a position where if you don't do the exchange sack, it's equal. So it wasn't like white had the win in hand. It was an equal position. And this just created a bunch of imbalances that favor white. And the only imbalance that favored black was material. So you went from equal to I can push all these different imbalances in my favor. Okay, Justin saying queen g7, Atticus J, rook h4. Mate in 5. Knight f6. Bishop f6. Mate in 5. Queen g7. Yeah, queen g7 is correct. Rook takes g7. H takes g. And now knight to f6 check. King takes. Rook takes f7, h7 check. King moves. Bishop h6 mate. White is +6 in material. Not a Friday, but it is a queen sack, Bob. This was amazing. So playing a3, the hard thing with playing a3 on move 6 is after bishop c5, you really want to be confident in the move b4. And this, after bishop d4, I thought white was worse here. White is better, but you are only better if you find knight g to e2, which goes down this forced line of sacrificing the rook. So a3 I played in the game, bishop c5, and I chickened out. I didn't play b4. Now I'm going to show you guys a few moves deeper, and this is an example of what not to do. I got into a very bad position here. I played h3. I'm trying to restrict the knights, but h4 is still a better move here. My opponent castles, knight f3. He goes a5. So now he's shutting down this b4 plan. And I kind of was stubborn and thought, okay, I'll force b4 through. Rook b1, I'm going to play b4. I get it in. But now he just drops back, and I can't play c5. And what's happening here is this eval is -0.5 for black. I'm slowly digging my own holes in terms of imbalances. I allowed black to create this better bishop because I didn't play b4 right away after I played a3. I gave black this open a file by being stubborn and forcing b4 through, right? So I already gave black those, I just handed those imbalances on a platter and said, here, take these advantages. Now I play g3. I'm trying to shut down this knight a little bit, but what am I doing? I'm opening up my king position. He goes queen e7. I prepared a castle. I'm trying to get a little bit fancy. He goes f5, h5, moves his knight back to h8. I kind of thought I was trying to play in the style of Botvinnik, but I also knew this was very uncomfortable. I don't like the position of my king. I don't like the activity that black has. This bishop is coming out to f5 in 2 seconds. It's going to be on the diagonal of the rook. All of this felt bad during the game, but I'm trying to play active. I go bishop e3. Take, take. He goes rook a3. So this position is equal in terms of material, but I want you guys in the chat to type what is the eval in this position. Give me your best guess. What is the eval? -2, says Daniel. Minaj, if you signed up, if you got the email from me this morning, you will get an email link to this full live stream. Otherwise, there will be a cropped version posted on YouTube where we take out the beginning and the end. Probably in a couple days. Chess Simple says minus 3.14159. It's close, but it's needs more sig figs. You guys are pretty close. It's around -1, maybe 1.5 for black. So pretty big advantage for black. But what I like about your evals is it shows what you've learned already in today's lesson. I think if you normally just look at material, it's easy to think this is close to equal, but really it's around that -1.5 area. So I play queen c1, takes on e4, I grab the rook, he takes on f3. This trade happens. And now at this point, he should go pawn to e4. And this position is just terrible. I was able to pull off the win in the endgame when the clocks got low, but that's kind of beside the point. This is a good game for takeaways for me in terms of how do I control the opponent's pieces? And also, when I'm looking to overpress, I need to think about the imbalances that favor black, not just the imbalances that favor white, right? So here, trying to play moves like b4 and then g3, these are both bad moves, both bad pawn moves. And I'm trying to create imbalanced advantages, but I'm actually digging my own holes. I'm making the position worse. So those are kind of the takeaways for me. I need to be careful about doing that. And I need to look for those stronger moves to control the opponent without creating any weaknesses. Like the real quick h4, I think was critical on move 6. It's very easy to understand once you see it. And then you don't even need to figure out like a3 and can I go for b4? No, it looks like black pins me. Oh, it's okay, I can guard. Oh, he's going to take. Oh, I can sack the rook. Oh, he's going to take. You don't need to know all that if you find a move like h4 here and just play simple.